The Star Trek movies. Love them or hate them. We've had 13 movies. So let's do the ranking from 13 down to number 1. So let's start at number 13. And it's Star Trek Beyond. So this was the third film in the Kelvin timeline. And personally, I felt this was the weakest of the three of the films. They went for very sort of an action sort of kind of vibe to it, which whilst it's good to have action in Star Trek, I wouldn't say it's really what Star Trek is about. Certainly based on character development. Yeah, for me, this one, number 13, is the weakest. So coming in at number 12, and it's part of the Next Generation films. So we're talking about Star Trek Insurrection. Again, probably for me, the weakest of the Next Generation films. Almost felt more like a TV sort of episode in a way. Yeah, it didn't really sort of resonate well with me, this one. So that's my number 12. Coming in at number 11, and it is Star Trek Nemesis. So we're continuing with the Next Generation films. This was the final film from that sort of franchise, Picard and crew. Obviously, we did lose the character of Data in this film, which was quite a sad passing at the time. Not so much the impact now, because obviously we've had Picard where they resurrected Data, so it doesn't quite have the same sort of impact. That for me was the sort of highlight of that film. The rest of the film felt very, very average in my opinion. Okay, so coming in at number 10, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. So this was the fifth film with starring William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy and DeForest Kelley as the original crew. And this one was directed by William Shatner. Probably one of the weaker of the Star Trek films from the original series. Probably I would say it is the weakest of those films. Whilst there are some moments which I quite enjoyed in the film. Two moments I can think of are the scene where the three of them are sort of on a camping trip. I quite like that scene. And the sort of dealing with loss, which the character of Cybok kind of brings to each character. And certainly did think they were really good scenes, sort of dealing with the subject of loss. However, the rest of the film didn't really sort of gel for me. Yeah, certainly one of the weakest entries. So coming in at number 9, so we shoot back to the Kelvin films, and we're talking about Star Trek Into Darkness. So this was the one that was kind of like the almost the remake of The Wrath of Khan. This time around we had Benedict Cumberbatch playing the character of Khan, although this was sort of shrouded in sort of mystery throughout the sort of production of the film, and right up until its release they tried to keep a lid on it, and they kind of reversed sort of scenes within the film. So rather than Spock dying, Kirk died saving the ship, and yeah, I don't know, for me it felt a very sort of, well, it was J.J. Abrams, and he kind of seemed to be one of these directors that was sort of very much sort of just sort of remaking films, putting a bit of a different spin on them. Obviously he'd done it with The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, a bit of an overrated director in my opinion. So yeah, I didn't really think much to this one for Into Darkness. I know a lot of people did quite like it. It's got moments in it that I did enjoy, but yeah, certainly one of the weaker entries for me in the Star Trek franchise. Okay, so coming in at number 8. Now, I will say from this point onwards, the films for me certainly get better. And yeah, definitely sort of improved for me. And number 8 is the first film in the Kelvin timeline, and that is the first Star Trek film. So this was a brand new cast. They remodeled it on the original series with the uniforms from that time. Obviously, we had a more up-to-date Enterprise, but it was kind of an origin story for these characters, and the new actors that played the roles, I thought, did a great job. It felt refreshing. We had kind of got a bit stale with Star Trek at this point, but yeah, J.J. Abrams did actually produce a really good reboot film. It did feel fresh. It did feel sort of yeah, some thought had gone behind this. It certainly didn't feel like a remake. It had its own thing. So, yeah. Okay, so coming in at number 7 is Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. Now, for a lot of people, this is probably a lot higher in their rankings. And I can understand why. It very much puts the original crew sort of in modern times. Obviously, this was sort of shot in the late 80s, and it puts them in that time. It's a time travel film, and there's a lot of comedic elements to this, which I guess for non-Star Trek audiences, it's very relatable, and it's a lot of fun. It was great to see the cast sort of go back in time and deal with the sort of quest to bring Wales back into the future. It was a very clever story. It was directed by Leonard Nimoy. Really well acted by the whole cast and crew. You know, they did a great job with the whole thing. Yeah, really, really enjoyed this one. So coming in at number 6, and it is The Search for Spock. So this one again was directed by Leonard Nimoy. This was on the back of the Wrath of Khan, the events of the Wrath of Khan. And yeah, again, thoroughly enjoyable film. Really, really well done. Obviously, they go back to the Genesis planet that is kind of starting to break down. They're trying to find Spock. And obviously, this is the sort of journey of Spock trying to, well, he, you know, sort of regenerates from being a young boy into an adult, into basically back into Leonard Nimoy at the end of the film. You see the destruction of the Enterprise, which is you know, quite a big thing for Star Trek fans. It was the original ship that got destroyed, and then we went to the Enterprise A after this. Obviously, it didn't feature in the Voyage Home, but then it came back in the Final Frontier. So yeah, really, really enjoyable film. Some great characters in it. So coming in at number 5, and it's the final film in the original 6 films, and we're talking about The Undiscovered Country. Fantastic film. Returning director Nicholas Meyer, who'd done The Wrath of Khan. And yeah, you know, it was the sort of farewell to the original crew. There's a wonderful ending with all the signatures of all of the cast and, well, the crew. And yeah, it's a bit of a sad ending, really, because it was kind of like the last time that you saw all of them together. Obviously, they did, some of the characters did come back for Generations, which was the first Next Generation film. But yeah, thoroughly good film. Obviously, all to do with the Klingons. You know, Kirk's hatred of the Klingons. And yeah, great film, The Undiscovered Country. So coming in at number 4, and it's the second Next Generation film. and it is First Contact. So this was obviously seeing the Next Generation crew return after the events of Generations, and with the old foe of the Borg, who obviously appeared in many episodes of the TV series. Obviously the strong connection with Picard, and his alter sort of ego is Locutus, and his kind of hatred of this species that assimilate and take over species and want to sort of, you know, recolonize, Borgify, if you worlds and all this sort of a thing. With this one, you see the Queen Borg, played fantastically by Alice Krige. I think that's how you pronounce it. And she tries to turn Data against the crew, and some very, very clever makeup where you get to see sort of human skin grafted onto his face. Very, very clever makeup. That sort of half of his face is android, half of it is human. Thought that was absolutely fantastic, and it's a real sort of adventure film. This one, a lot of action in it. Obviously, we get to meet Zefram Cochrane, the sort of inventor of warp drive. So there's all that sort of history behind, you know, the Star Trek timeline, which has always been sort of quite important in Star Trek, moments in time that are documented. So yeah, fantastic film. Okay, so we're down to the top 3 Star Trek movies, in my opinion. So just before we get into that, if you're new here and you like Star Trek, or you like any other science fiction films, franchise, TV, all this sort of thing, why not consider subscribing to the channel? Hit the subscribe button down below, stick notifications on so you'll be informed when I upload new videos to the channel. There's a wealth of other stuff on here, and you can see I've got Star Wars, Back to the Future, Jaws, a lot of action, a lot of sci-fi, a lot of playlists that people can go and have a look at their leisure. So yeah, please consider subscribing. So number 3 is the first Next Generation film, and it is Star Trek Generations. So this saw Captain Kirk and Jean-Luc Picard finally meet in the Nexus, and I think this is a fantastic film. It's my favourite of the Next Generation films. Obviously, we still have the original Enterprise D in this. Unfortunately, it gets destroyed at the end of this film. But yeah, there's so much emotion in this film for me. Obviously, with Kirk's death, there's a lot of points in the film that really sort of choked me up. And I remember going to see this at the cinema and absolutely thought it was fantastic. For me, it's just a wonderful kind of transition from the original crew. I know we only get to see Kirk, Scotty and Chekhov, but you couldn't have all of the characters from the original series sort of in this film. It needed to be a sort of passing of the torch, and I thought it was done very, very well. The final sort of scenes with Kirk and Picard, I thought it was done really, really well. And, you know, I still get a few tears in my eyes, even today, still watching the film. So, yeah, I think it's the best Next Generation film by far. Okay, so coming in at number 2, and to be honest, both of these films I could put either way round for different reasons. But let's get into it. So number 2 is Star Trek The Motion Picture. So obviously this was the first Star Trek film that we ever got. It came out in 1979, I think it was. And it was originally going to be a Star Trek series, Phase 2. But they decided, with the success of Star Wars and Close Encounters, very much that late 70s time. There was a lot of science fiction films, so they thought, yeah, we're going to go with a um, motion picture for the Star Trek franchise. Yes, you could say this is a slow burn film. For me, it's very much a thinking man's film, this one. Uh, Fantastic visuals, certainly the best visuals of any Star Trek film, in my opinion. It's kind of has that sort of 2001 kind of vibe about it, I suppose. Yeah, I still find the visuals absolutely fantastic, mesmerizing, thought provoking. Really feel like it feels like outer space to me. Um, and the 4K edition that they've done, remastering it, putting extra effects in, so you see more of the Vija vessel. I thought was done absolutely fantastic. It looks fantastic on 4K as well. Yes, okay, I would say the maybe some of the pacing does let it down. It's a very slow burn movie. Not a lot happens in it. It's not certainly not an action film, but it's more of a thinking man's film. For its time, I think it was made that way. I think modern audiences will struggle with this film because it's not like straight in with the action. You know, people may find it quite boring, quite slow. And I can appreciate that. But because for me, it was the first Star Trek film that I ever saw, and just the visuals and the characterization is there. Obviously, between the three main characters, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. Obviously, you get to see the other characters, Sulu, Chekhov, Uhura. You know, they all have their parts to play, but yeah, it's still very, very strong on characters, which has always been what made Star Trek great, and which I think in the sort of modern series, this is where it's going wrong. There aren't the characters there, the strong characters, the individualism, the thought-provoking stuff isn't there with modern Star Trek, unfortunately. But yeah, for me, um, on a different day, I probably could put this as number one. But like I say, yeah, I'm putting it at number two, the motion picture. Okay, so my number one Star Trek film of all time, The Wrath of Khan. So this was the second Star Trek film for the original crew, and it was kind of a continuation of a story from one of the original series episodes called Space Seed, where we were introduced to the character of Khan, and he was, a villain, and he and his people were stranded on a planet which they thought was, when they left them there, it was a thriving planet, but unfortunately, it got sort of thrown out of its orbit by another planet being destroyed, and they've had to fight for survival. And this is essentially a revenge film. Khan is after Kirk, and it's very much a film, like a cat and mouse film, submarine film in space, and the character development in this is just wonderful. Such strong characters. The rivalry between Khan and Kirk is just wonderful, and the tension builds as it goes on. It's very much more of an action film. You can tell very much this film was almost like a reboot from the first film. Different uniforms. All the uniforms in this film were carried right the way through to the undiscovered country, and it resonated with the fans. The fans loved it. I think maybe modern audiences, because they maybe didn't grow up with the Star Trek series, might not have the same connection with this that, say, I do, my age group and older. They might prefer the sort of Kelvin films because they're made for a younger audience, although us older people can still relate to them. But yeah, again, Nicholas Meyer, fantastic director. He really got everything out of the actors, you know, just built a fantastic, tense and memorable film, which I think still stands the test of time. But like I say, I could say that the motion picture is the thinking man's Star Trek film, and The Wrath of Khan is the action film. But both films very much are still character driven. You've still got those three key main actors, William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy and DeForest Kelley. That trio always sort of delivered in these films. And you know, this film towards the end, you know, the death of Spock, saving the Enterprise, and, you know, and that wonderful scene between Kirk and Spock. It still chokes me up today to watch it because it's done so well, and the directing of it was so on point. Just a wonderful, wonderful scene, that one. And for me, that's what makes The Wrath of Khan just a wonderful film, with all of these elements all brought together. And yeah, my number one choice, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So there we go. So that's my ranking of all 13 Star Trek movies. Be interested to hear down in the comments how you would rank these films. Would you rank them any differently to me? Are there ones that you would sort of say they're much higher up in the list or much lower in the list? Yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.